Welcome back to Demystifying Self-Publishing. Today's episode is one that sits at the intersection of unimaginable loss and unwavering love. In 2018, Heather Shtuka's 20-year-old son Ryan vanished after leaving a house party in Sun Peaks, British Columbia. In the years since, Heather has transformed her personal grief into a powerful and compassionate voice, not only for her son, but for countless families with missing loved ones. She is the author of Missing from Me, a memoir that gives shape to the shapeless pain of ambiguous loss. And she's become a tireless advocate for missing persons and their families across Canada. Heather, thank you so much for being here today. I am really honored that you took the time to have a conversation with us, and I know it will be really moving for our audience as well.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, for those who may be unfamiliar with your story, can you take us back to the moment that inspired this book, Missing from Me, when Ryan went missing?
So Ryan is our oldest son. My husband Scott and I have 3 children. And so Ryan came first in 1997 and then was followed 3 years later with his sister Jordan, and then 8 years later with his youngest sister we call the baby, Juliana. So when Ryan went missing, he was 20, just a month shy of his 21st birthday. And so really good kid, we were a very close-knit family, we still are. And Ryan had gone to work with his father's company that his father works for a year, and did a year of school, and then was still struggling to figure out to find himself, what he wanted to do next. And so he made the decision to leave Beaumont, Alberta, and head to a ski village that was about 9.5 hours away, Sun Peaks, outside of Kamloops, BC. And so he had been there for 2.5 months, just going to work there for a winter season as a lift operator. And I was really excited about him doing that. It was something that he had never really shown an interest in, leaving the house. And as parents, probably particularly of boys, you're sort of, thrilled and excited that they want to step out of their comfort zone. And I really was thrilled. And he had gone up there and seemingly was having a great time, was snowboarding 36 days straight, was really, really into the whole environment of being there. And a month shy of his 21st birthday, he had gone out to a party and then vanished in thin air, it seems like. So my husband and I received the notification on February 18th, 2018. He hadn't shown up to work, and he hadn't come home from the party he had attended the night before. And that sort of started, you talk about the before and the after, like when your life seemed seemingly normal, and then it all changed in a blink of an eye. And that was our moment, getting the notification that he was missing and that they had called the RCMP, so the local law enforcement. And so, I don't think in that moment, certainly, I hadn't thought about ever putting that story pen to paper.
Mm-hmm.
But while we were up there, we had lived up there for 4.5 months searching for him. We had received one official day of searching. So the Sunday we got up there, they searched for Ryan, and then they said, we have done all the tasks that have been set out for us, and we won't be coming back until there is a change in circumstance or a change in the environment, which meant the snow melting, because it was right in the middle of winter. And, on your way out of town tomorrow, the next day, just stop by and we'll let you know what we will be doing with your son's case. And my husband and I sort of looked at each other and thought, well, we're not leaving. And so that sort of started that, we've had to put emotions away and think logically, how are we going to bring him home? How are we going to do the search? And I was right off, finished I ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I was just barely weight bearing at that time. And so I couldn't go out and search. And so for me, it was just starting writing, letting people know when they wanted to know, have you found him yet? Have you found him yet? And so I started write what was happening and thanking people. And then it became cathartic for me. And I think that's what started. Did I think that I was going to turn it into a book at the time? Absolutely not. But it was a way for me to put my feelings about what was about what was happening right now, our search efforts, the pain and the grief that comes with that ambiguous loss, not knowing where your son is, not knowing how to find them, not knowing if you'll find them, all of those things you're processing, but also the bittersweet of remembering that. And so that is the beginning of the book. And I started writing, and then I continued to write. And then it became something probably about a couple of years later. I thought this may resonate with people in some way, and maybe it'll continue Ryan's legacy if I thought about putting it into a book.
Absolutely. And it very much has. I mean, you are one of our most successful authors. And I think that that is such a testament to the power of love and sharing his memory, as well as connecting with so many people across the country and outside of that. I know that you had started a Facebook group and there were posts happening through there. So when did that group begin, and what was the initial kind of purpose and content moving through that group?
It was first set up, I think, as a central place for people to find out information. We were looking, obviously, for volunteers, whether they could come out and search or whether they could donate water or something for our volunteer searchers, that sort of thing. So it just sort of started as a call out, share the story, printing off a missing poster. Can you please share that in your neighborhood? If you're out for doing purposeful walks, if you could keep an eye out. If you're out on your skiing, or you're out with your dogs, or you're out hiking, or whatever you were in the winter snowshoeing in that area, if you could keep a lookout for him. So it sort of started as a central place for information, as an information hub. And then I started responding to, like, I'm going to write. And I wrote every single day for almost 4 months. Every single day there was a post. And so sometimes the post was information. Sometimes the post was telling people what I was experiencing, what I was going through that day. Sometimes it was a memory of Ryan and how did I get to be the mother of these 3 amazing children and that sort of thing. My regrets as a parent that I think all parents would go through in that moment of loss. I did a post once where I was talking about I was always in the background of my family photos. As mothers, we're taking all the pictures. And you realize when you've got them all printed or you're looking back on them, you're like, there isn't a lot of pictures of me. It's a lot of pictures of my husband, it's a lot of pictures of my kids, and there's not a lot of pictures. And I'm like, I went through my parenthood, my motherhood, of sitting in the back seat, being a passenger in my children's life and mine. And, just something as simple as that, just a memory, and people were responding like, I do that too. So the book wasn't necessarily fashion certainly for somebody that was going through ambiguous loss, but I think just that experience as a parent going through any grief. And there was moments where you talked and thanked community for coming out. It started so small, but the Facebook group sort of grew. And with that, people were sharing their experiences as parents. They were sharing Ryan's story, which was really important, and providing us with support and engaging. And it certainly has grown from there. We have close to 71,000 people that now follow Ryan's Facebook site all over the world. And, it's a great way I think, to support other families that are going through similar circumstances. But it also is a great way for communities to connect. We've created this sort of legacy of love and kindness in his name that seems to have really taken off, and people really respond to it.
I think it's so powerful to see the community that has been created around Ryan, around the story, around your family, and the investment that people have within your journey. It really goes to show, I think, the power of connection and relatability, and you clearly have done an incredible job in opening up and being authentic and being vulnerable in such an unfathomable time for so many people. So I'm sure that played a really large part in the overall momentum of the group and what we would maybe refer to in a numbers situation, the success of the group and the size of the group. Was there a specific moment that made you take everything that you had written and decide that publishing a book was the way to move forward? I know you mentioned having a legacy of Ryan and of what he meant to your family and continues to mean to your family, but was there a specific point in time that made you decide, okay, a book is the way to go here?
I mean, certainly when you write the post, and because I was writing the post every day, you get the same people that are engaged, and you should write a book. And, of course, that appeals to your vanity, even maybe in your most trying moments. But I don't know if I ever took it necessarily serious enough. But I think at some point, as time went on and the outcome was never going to be what we wanted it to be. But as time goes by, there was this real fear that, we may not find Ryan, certainly in our lifetime. And we've had to reconcile with ourselves with that. And so many things, like the first beginning, when he went missing, we have to reconcile ourselves with the fact that our son probably won't be coming home. And then as the weather started getting warmer, you had to reconcile that if you were to find him, as compared to being in the dead of winter, finding him is going to look different. And that reconciling that you may not find all of them. And now we've gotten to the point where we reconcile that we may not be able to find him. And so for me, the book, the thought of writing this book and putting it pen to paper was like saying that long after Scott and I are here on this earth, there will be a record of Ryan. And that makes it's bittersweet, I think, because I know that his memory will live long out, and he has such an impact on us. He's achieved so much, not only in his lifetime, but also in his absence. And this was just a way of letting people know that he existed and that he mattered, and he still matters to us.
Absolutely. I think that, legacy and documenting and not wanting to forget, or rather allow for people to get to know somebody who means so much to us, is such a driving motivator for so many people who do choose to share their most intimate words with the public through a book.
Scary, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not, I think writing can be difficult no matter what the subject is. If I were to write a cookbook, the first edition might not be perfect, but there's so many other recipes that I could add for the next one, that sort of thing. But I think writing a memoir, I was acutely aware that I would get one shot at doing this, and I wanted to get it right. So it felt like an internal pressure that I wanted to make sure that it was perfect. And, despite the success in the very beginning, I thought, I'll write this book, and if only my mother reads it, then I will consider that a success. Like, his name will still be out there. That I certainly didn't expect for it to take off in the way that it did, but there was no expectation on my part that that's what's going to be. I actually thought the worst part was starting it and writing it. But I think letting that go out into the world and having people react to it, that was probably the scariest part.
Definitely. Well, you don't know how things will be received or interpreted. And of course, it's such intimate details that you're sharing, and something that is still at that point very raw, very fresh, as it continues to be. How could it not be, as a mother speaking about her child? And I think, talking about legacy and leaving this record outside of the book, there has been, as you mentioned, so much work done in Ryan's name. And I would love to talk about how you have identified so many gaps in this process of missing persons through the different systems that are in place and different barriers that families face when trying to locate their loved ones. Can you chat a little bit about how you began the process of getting involved beyond Ryan's case?
I think it was probably the very first day, even though, that was a scene setter. I don't know if I thought what that was going to come from, because you certainly didn't know the end result, but we had one official day of searching. They certainly, search and rescue, they are tasked by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, so the RCMP. So they are tasked by the local law enforcement to do a certain set of duties and to look at the search scene through specific tasks. Once those are done, they go home and they don't come back unless they're tasked again by the RCMP. So we knew we had one day. They did come back the following Saturday, but then they were, although certainly more expertise than us, but they're doing the same thing we are. We're now looking for a body. We're not looking for recovery or, rescue. It's recovery at that point. And so you're just extra bodies, no more so than us, I felt at the time. I mean, certainly I think they would argue that they provided more services than that, but that's what emotionally as a parent we felt. We were very let down. And I think there's this misconception that when a loved one goes missing, that lots of law enforcement will be there and they will be holding your hand all the way through. There'll be somebody there, a liaison or something. That actually does not happen. The RCMP, certainly they investigate, but they don't do search and rescue. That's why they task it out to your local search and rescue groups. But we didn't know. And what I like to now tell other families is that you need to prepare yourselves for the eventuality that they will go home. And they all go home at some point or another. How long that will be, that's the crux of all of this, is there's an inconsistency to parents. That might not be the case. There's obviously a very systematic way that search and rescue look at how they're approaching whatever search efforts that they're looking to. But it's not transparent. So parents or loved ones would not know. So some families received 1 week, some will receive 10. And you could look at any case across Canada or even North America, and some families will receive a smaller amount of time, some will receive a longer amount of time. And I certainly don't begrudge families that receive 2 or 3 weeks, months, if that's what it turns out to be. I wish every family could, but we also know that there is a disparity among how missing people are searched for, how much interest is taken. Certainly we know the reasons why they go missing will play a huge part in the appetite for the public to share, to search, to spread awareness, the appetite for how law enforcement might look at it. So whether you've lived a vulnerable lifestyle, if you have addiction issues, if you are in the sex trade at some point, you're in a crisis, it shouldn't matter. Why people go missing, it should not matter. There's usually always someone left behind that cares and wants to know what happened to their loved one. And every person that goes missing should feel or know that everything is being done to bring them home. And I don't know we obviously know that is not the case. Right. And so it shouldn't matter why, but it does. So people triage in their areas and they look at nationally, locally, what are their focus on? And so loved ones of missing people fall through the cracks. We advocated, but I did not know that you had as a parent to advocate, that you had to hold your law enforcement accountable, that you had to get the word out, that you had to keep sharing. And you're doing that at your most vulnerable moment. You're grief-stricken, and yet you still have to forge forward. Not everybody knows that, and maybe not everybody has the network of people that will help support them. We were very fortunate that we had this network of friends, family. The community really rallied around us, whether they were in Beaumont or whether they were in Sun Peaks or the Kamloops area. We had a lot of support. Not all families had that. So there's a disparity in the way people search for. There's gaps in how they are searched. There's a lack of consistency and transparency across the board. And I think that all of those things need to be addressed. And hopefully I know that there's some brilliant people that are behind that. Certainly in Ontario, they've started a bill where they want to apply certain parameters to how things going, and I do believe that needs to happen. So for us at the time, we were just floundering through having to do this and having to, on top of all of the investigative and search and rescue efforts, which are separate, they're outside of my control. The things that we had on social media, the good and the bad, and there was a lot of ugly in that. How do you navigate through private investigators? How do you navigate through people that are wanting to sort of approach you with their mediumship or, the psychics, all of those things that play a part while you're in your most desperate stage. And so one of the things is that I co-founded a nonprofit with three other brilliant, wonderful women that have experienced loss. And we thought that we could provide the resources and support for families that are going through similar circumstances. So help navigating that. How do you deal with social media? How do you deal with search and how do you prepare yourself when they go home? Because they will.
Right.
And we were lucky because while there's search and rescue that are funded by government provincially, there actually are volunteer search and rescue groups that you can call upon that can come in and help get some of that search underway that you need in order to bring your loved one home.
So let's talk a little bit about that, about where things shifted from your observation and this realization that you were left floundering and that there were these disparities to then the action of connecting with these two other women. How did that come about? And when did you as a collective decide we can use our knowledge and our experience to support other families who are going through similar things?
We arrived in the morning on Sunday. They did their search about 5:30. They came to tell us they hadn't found Ryan, and these are the next steps. So on your way out of town, sort of conversation, and we said we're not going to do it. And I know they said, we won't be coming back. And I just remember in that moment going, okay, so I'll see you tomorrow. I thought, okay, well, not going to have hundreds of people here, but there's going to be something. And so when we walked in Monday morning to the ski patrol that had been turned into the command center for that Sunday, it was turned back into a ski patrol. And I'm looking around, and that's when it hit us that if Ryan was going to be found, if the search was going to be continued, it was going to be upon Scott and I and our friends and our volunteers to be able to do that. And so that's what we did. And in that moment, whatever emotions I had about my son going missing, I had to put that in another spot, because then I had to be logical. I had to think about the command, like all the strategies around how do you set up a command center? What are the logistics that need to go in there? How do you get volunteers? That sort of thing. So that started it. And with that, because we were so public and out in Facebook and sharing quite a bit, and we had a lot of media attention, this family, Tammy Neuron and Kate Sinclair, they were going through in the midst of their own search for their brother, Dominic Neuron. And he had was in a plane crash that had crashed right outside of Revelstoke. And so they were in the thick of their search. And so they were doing a lot of again, it was remote interior BC. Theirs was an aerial, ours was more focused on ground searching. And so when they contacted us to give us a little bit, hey, these are some of the things you need to be aware of. Hey, have you thought of this? Have you considered this particular group, nonprofit, that sort of thing? So they began the conversation. And then at some point, we're sitting there going, how do you create this legacy for Ryan? I certainly didn't know it was going to be the book. How do I create some? And they were like, oh, you could do a scholarship in his name for rugby or, football or snowboarding. And I'm like, yeah, that's all great. It doesn't really drive. It doesn't touch my heart in the same way. Sure, I'd love to, but I need something. And what is the most important thing right now? And what came through so clear was that there was no support for us. We were out there. I remember asking the superintendent for the Kamloops RCMP, and I was like, if this was your child missing, what would you want to have done? What would you need to have done? And what would you do in order to bring your child home? And whatever you think of, whatever list you make, whatever resources you would tap into, tell me so that I can access them too. I remember Scott going to the Kamloops search and rescue manager going, we'll pay you. Can someone come and help us? Tell us what we need to do. Tell us how we need to learn how to search for someone. What are the things? It's like this crash course in a career you never asked to do, but now you're having to do, and you're having to do it on your own. And so they were like, we can't, and we can't even show you because there's liability. So if something happened to our search and rescue or our volunteers, we're at a spot that we can't tell you any of those things. So, and I remember 3 weeks into searching, and we had a map of the area, and we kept sending out 5 people here, 5 people here, and we were blitzing. It felt like an area Snow fell every single day. The next day you'd walk out and you're thinking, did people even go out there? And I remember after 3 weeks looking at the map and like, we've been to these places. We've done them. They've all been searched. And I'm like, well, I haven't been there. And I've searched, but even in the areas I searched, because I feel like I wasn't aware of what I was supposed to be doing, I walked away thinking, I don't know if I could say for 100% sure that I did what I was supposed to. Now we're asking other people who are coming for a day, an afternoon, that sort of thing, have they done their best? Absolutely. But did they do what they needed to do because of lack of experience? I don't really know. And I remember 3 weeks, we did one area and we were on our hands and knees. There was Juliana, my youngest, which now I would never have done. But in the moment, we weren't expecting to search. We were just walking. And then we sort of said, well, let's start here. And I don't even want to imagine what that would have happened if we had, in our search, had found a terrible thing for a 12-year-old. So I certainly wouldn't suggest that. And looking back, that is one of my biggest regrets. However, we were in there searching in snow. There was two other, my friend Nancy and my friend Leanne, and we were going through, and then my husband calls and he's like, well, what are you doing? Where are you? And I'm like, we're over at this area. He brought every single one of the volunteers because they were done for the day. There was about 25 of us. And we did one side of a snowbank and we were on our hands and knees going through every snow. And as tedious as that was, it was the first time after 3 weeks that I could absolutely say I didn't know where Ryan was, but I know where he wasn't. And that one place was. And that just changed your whole perspective. So now we're adapting. We're like, okay, this is what we can't send 5 people here, 3 people here. We actually need to go as a group and just instead of doing 10% of area with 100% of our people, we need to take all of our people and do 10% of an area and make sure it's done 100%. And so it's just that adaptation and the way we grew as people in search and rescue. And I would say 7 years later, that Scott and I have really leaned into that search and rescue efforts. And I think that we have become efficient at what we do.
Hey listeners, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love it if you'd take a moment to leave a quick review. It helps more writers discover the podcast and lets us know what you'd like to see more of. Your words matter on the page and in the reviews. Thanks for supporting our community. It sounds very much like you had no roadmap to deal with this situation. You were out there trying to make the most of the information that you did have, which was an approximate location, and then the group of people that were at your disposal, which didn't include trained professionals in the scenario. How, through this experience, have you been able to use this organization now to better equip these families? I imagine now that you've had this experience, as you mentioned, and you and Scott being very proficient within the search and rescue atmosphere, that there are a lot more resources available to these families than were available to yours.
And I think through our experiences, we have met so many people. And the one thing that came out of it is there is a canine search and rescue in Kamloops that are volunteer. And so when Scott and I are not in Sun Peaks doing the things we need to do to bring awareness or to continue to search for Ryan, they go up and they train their dogs and they go through the area. And so we have met so many people that have that experience that we can lean on to ask for advice, to sort of go through, because there is no handbook for something like this. Or if there's a handbook, I have never been able to find one on what to do in the first 24 hours, in the first 48, 72, and then lengthy ones. I mean, the majority of people that go missing are usually found within that 72-hour mark. It's the ones that would be longer. How do you give hope to families that, because there's no end in sight and there's no way to walk off the trail? You can't just sit there and go, this is too hard. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm going to bow out. We don't get to do that. And any grief journey, certainly a missing loved one, but anybody on that grief journey doesn't get a chance to say, I'm no longer doing this. I want to step off. And so you just have to, you lean on the things you take from people that have had experience. And I hope at the end of the day that we give families some sort of hope that you can still continue to search and to advocate for your loved one, and that you can also find ways to still immerse yourself in your remaining family, your life, that while it's not always easy to stand and face the world, that you can surround yourself with supportive people that will help you on the days that you can. So I hope that that's at the end of the day, maybe what the book does, maybe what our search and efforts do, what our my Facebook or the Freebird Project, all of those things maybe provide that sort of support so families don't feel so alone.
I think also you had touched on at the top of the episode some of the revelations that you had in going through the experience, and some of these moments that maybe you hadn't given too much thought to prior to or in the before of this tragedy, like being in the background of your life and of your children's lives. And I think even that realization and sharing those little insights and tidbits of knowledge allow for people to live perhaps differently or more presently in a way that they may not have before. So outside of families who have experienced loss or a missing loved one, they very much can benefit from the perspective that you've had to offer throughout this journey.
It's very humbling because it was self-reflective. And I certainly didn't, again, I didn't mean for it to be that way. I was very authentic, I think, and very transparent in my process and even in the writing. I certainly talked about my strengths and certainly my flaws as a parent that you think and the regrets that you have, but it was very self-reflective because there's certain things that I will regret and I will continue to regret as a parent, as a wife, as a partner, as a daughter, all of those things that you go through in life. But the one thing I can say with absolute certainty, which brings me so much peace and comfort, is that every single day our children were told how much they were loved. You know, we love you. Even when you were mad, oh, you're driving me crazy. I love you. They always knew. And so when I think of Ryan's final moments, no matter what those look like, no matter what circumstances surround him, I know my son, if he left this world, he left knowing how very much and deeply loved and how much he mattered to his sisters, to his friends, and to his family, and to Scott and I. And so, you know, some peace, some comfort in that. It certainly doesn't dull the grief, but I think that's the one thing that we did well. And I think that we continue to make sure that we do that going forward with our girls, like, and with each other, is that there's a lot of forgiveness that takes place, all the things that, you know, led up to the messy parts of being a parent, the you know, the clunky bits of having a relationship, the ups and downs that come with that. I think that the book was allowed me to be self-reflective and then to have grace for myself as well.
It's such a cathartic and therapeutic experience, allowing yourself to sit in that emotion and to confront feelings and thoughts and things that maybe you hadn't previously allowed for yourself to do. How do you navigate the emotional labor of advocacy and this journey while continuing to cope with your own personal loss?
I think for me, there's sort of two trains of thought with, you know, the navigating of it. You know, the one was, I always think that I will meet my son one day. I don't know what that looks like. I'm certainly not a very religious person, but I do have that feeling that I will meet my son again one day. And I don't want to stand in front of my son and have him be so disappointed that I gave up, that I didn't even try, that I squandered the rest of my life on grief alone. And it is a struggle for me. The first couple of years, I really struggled with doing anything that I considered frivolous. So, you know, going out for dinner, you know, that might have been okay. But if people came with us, I was like, and now I'm celebrating moments. Like now I'm finding joy. How on earth can you do this when your son is out there waiting to be found? Like, how do you continue on? How do you even, you know, do those things? And I think maybe every parent goes through grief like that. But they have that closure, I think, which makes it a little bit different than somebody that is experiencing ambiguous loss, because I don't know what the outcome is. And while, everybody tells you should have hope, there's a certain point in me, what does that hope mean? Hope is different, hitting his head and having amnesia. Okay, that's hopeful after 7 years. 7 years of him still being out there, what does that look like for him? So, I run through the scenarios every single day on how that looks for him. But I also don't want pity. Scott and I have never wanted pity. We never want people to say, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Don't be sorry for us. I mean, we are going through the feelings and we're feeling them. Feel sorry for Ryan, because he's not here living the life he should be living, whatever that looked like for him. So for me, that was like making sure that I honored Ryan and also my girls. Like, they had so much taken away from them through no fault of their own, and certainly no fault of Ryan. But to take away from them, to not have their joy in life, not celebrating those moments that they should have be celebrating. So we've never given that up. We continue on, and we work through our feelings, and we talk about things a lot. So there is that point, is making sure that we would find ways to not only survive, but to try to thrive. And then I think that just, looking through my own growth and having a reflection of what I was about and what I put myself out to be, and how those things I almost feel like all the extraneous things have been burnt away, and you're able to look at your core, because I don't need those, right? Like, some of the things that I used to worry so much about, I no longer worry about. And we look for the silver lining. And I think that's the other thing that comes from that. Scott and I continuously look for the silver lining in everything, because Ryan's life was a gift. What is the silver lining in our child going missing? There isn't. However, I always look like, if there's a bucket, the loss of Ryan would have emptied that bucket. But I think what he's given us is this gift that while our bucket will never be completely full, I don't think it'll be ever empty. We're filled with people that we would never have met except for this journey, that have become such an important part of our lives. And we're so incredibly grateful. So how do you navigate that? Well, I don't think there's a reason why Ryan should be missing, or any other child, any other loved one. And so you can't explain, like, people always say there's a reason for this, like what you're doing. Heather, there's always a reason. I don't want there to be a reason, but there can be a purpose. And so for me, advocating, putting in that emotional labor, helps other families that don't have the support necessarily, or the network, may not know where to turn. And so if I can help them, that's a purpose.
Absolutely. I think that the sentiment behind that is beautiful and very powerful. And I would love to pivot slightly to chat about the new project that you are working on, because it very much ties into this idea of purpose and of what we leave behind, or how we have maybe inspired others to continue on in our name. So can you chat a little bit about this new project that you're working on?
So this is an entirely different author journey. Obviously, with Ryan, it was very much steeped into this memoir. And that was very difficult to promote. Like, I almost felt it was self-serving to promote the story of Ryan. So that took a long time for me to be comfortable with saying, hey, I wrote a book, and not feel like it's being boastful. This particular book is a children's book, and it's called Let's Talk About Dinosaurs. And it was the very first post that I ever did on the Facebook group, because I wanted to make Ryan real. Like, I just thought, you could tell all these adjectives and tell you what I thought he was and what other people would have described him, but they're just words. Anybody could use them at any time. I don't know if they convey the kind of feeling that we necessarily want to. And so, I talked about when he was younger, he used to play this game all the time where he'd ask you a question about dinosaurs. He always wants to talk about dinosaurs. And he would ask you a series of questions. You'd have to try to guess what the dinosaur was. And then for some reason, I never got it right. And at the time, we had no Google. So we were going to the library at least once or twice a week, stocking up on paleontology books. And it was an everyday thing. It was numerous times a day. He'd go through and like, Mommy, And I'm like, yes, Ryan. He's like, let's talk about, and he'd always have this huge pause. And you're like he was going to pretend like it was going to be ice cream flavors, or let's talk about, world peace, mom, that sort of thing. But it was that expectant pause, like, you don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm like, yeah, I actually do. But so then he'd be like, it's a surprise. We're going to talk about dinosaurs again. And, and then I'm trying to sit there, and he'd go, what has a long neck and eats plants? And I'm like, okay, it's Apatosaurus. No, that's not correct. I'm like, it's a long neck. Mummy, he goes, there's no such thing. That's not the proper word. I'm like, ugh. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know, Ryan. He's like, it's a diplodocus. I was such a savant when it came to understanding all the, like, photographic on understanding every single dinosaur. So I swear to God, it probably was an apatosaurus, but as soon as I said it, he was like, I'm pivoting. So that was the sort of a game. And so when you thought about doing this book, again, it continues to share the awareness and the love that we have for Ryan and how much he matters, but it's in a fun way. It has nothing to do with him being missing or anything. It's a beautiful memory that we had with him. And I'm happy to be able to share that love that he had, that we had with him, those shared moments, and to create this children's book, which then will feel more like a joyful, like, hey, everybody, I wrote a book. You should read, let's talk about dinosaurs. It's so cute, that sort of thing, rather than the other one.
And do you have a projected timeline for this project? And what does you'd mentioned the promotional process of Missing From Me being a tricky one to navigate. Do you have an idea of what that marketing and promotional process will look like this time around?
I think it'll be certainly a lot more positive. And it's not that Ryan's wasn't positive. It affected so many people. Missing From Me, it resonated with so many. I was very fortunate within the 24 hours, and it wasn't actually, we didn't even have the launch or the release date. Someone found out that you could buy it on Amazon, and within 24 hours, it had become a Canadian bestseller. Like it was, people are sending me like, look at the list. There's, Prince Harry, his memoir, Michelle Obama, Matthew Perry, and then fourth is Missing From Me. And I was like, I don't even know how that happens. But the fact that it got out to so many people was beautiful. I'm glad because it shares the story of him. But Scott, my husband, was my biggest PR person, going out telling everybody she wrote this. I always thought it feels self-serving. It feels like you're profiting off of your something that's happened to your child. And it took some time for your emotional to sort of sync with logical and go, the story would still be the story. The story of Ryan has not changed, but by me writing it, and perhaps writing it in a way that resonated with people, it allowed a greater access for people to understand Ryan's story and to share this legacy and his name. So that took some time. And as time went by, as the years went by, it sort of softened that approach where you're kind of going, yes, you might find some benefit out of reading that. This one here will be certainly different. It's not such a closed niche. Like if you're experiencing loss or ambiguous loss, grief, it's a more general. It's a children's book. It doesn't have a moral to the story. It's, not pertaining to one particular subject besides the dinosaur and the memories that you have during as a child with a parent or family interactions and stuff like that. The other thing is that because I started, and everything's been organic. And I wish I could tell you that there's a formula that if you do one thing or the other, whether it's the Facebook group or the marketing of Missing From Me, that there was a formula that you could follow. And if you did this, that you would have the same pathway that I did. I think that you always have to be authentic and genuine. And so when I started talking about Ryan in the dinosaur, it was one of my first memories, and I just talked about it. And our people within our Facebook group started then Dinosaur Green. And then, they had the little decal with the heart, the green heart, because Ryan was born on St. Patrick's Day. So green heart, green dinosaur. And that sort of went. And then people started posting, hey, I saw this cloud that looks like a dinosaur. It reminded me of you and Ryan. And now Ryan's been tied to dinosaurs, which, I think is absolutely amazing. And with that, we started making 3D dinosaurs. So they're the green neck dinosaurs. They have on them hashtag find Ryan Shtuka. They have this QR code that will lead you to find more about Ryan's story. But on the back, it talks about being kind, take the dino on your journey. If you want to leave him, that's great. If you want to keep him with you and take pictures, that's amazing too. And so we have manufactured, it's on a 3D printer, about 9,000 of them. And they have gone to, I think, almost 86 countries. I always like to say, because it seems so wild to me, including the Russian Federation, not that that's weird that it would go there, but the fact that it has expanded to every single corner. Like you're thinking, okay, well, I get that it might be in Canmore, but in the Russian Federation, Norway, Greece, South Africa, people will take them and leave them, and people will share the story. And so to me, that's inspiring. And I love that because the Let's Talk About Dinosaurs will fit in with our dinosaur theme seamlessly. And I think that, I'm fortunate enough, I think, in terms of marketing, because of Ryan's Facebook group, that I have an audience that already knows the story, that may be willing to take the book, buy the book, share the book, that sort of thing.
Amazing. I love the tie-in of the little manufactured dinosaur along with this book. I think that is such a beautiful way to remember Ryan and to have people think about him. And like you mentioned, whether they're bringing the little dinosaur with them or leaving it for somebody else to find, it's a really great way to continue to amplify his memory and his story.
And I think enjoy, you know what I mean? Missing posters is different. I'm happy if people share those, but the fact is those dinosaurs bring joy to us as a family. We can imagine if Ryan were here today, that he might also have the opportunity to go to some amazing places, meet some inspiring people, and have some fantastic experiences. And so when people post them, I think it brings joy to other people on the page. They get to see and live vicariously through where this little dino goes. But for us as a family, because I think when your child goes missing, or that moment of grief when a parent is experiencing loss of a child or a loved one, I suppose, you tend to think of the last moments. Like, I don't want Ryan's life to be reduced to the last day that anybody knew the story. He had almost 21 years of having this lasting impression. And so having this dinosaur go out and talk about kindness and legacy, and to be honest, I don't know if that would have been Ryan's legacy if he were to create one on his own. I think it might be very different, probably have something to do with Game Boy or PlayStation or, that sort of thing. And maybe snowboarding, it might not be a legacy or kindness. So that is my projection on for him. But I just think it's such a joyful way to remember our son and how much he's impacted us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for joining me for this conversation. And for those listening, can you let everyone know where they can learn more about all of the initiatives that you have going on currently?
You can go to my website, which is www.heathershtuka, which is difficult, I know, .com. But also you can go to Missing, find Ryan Shtuka, and that it has everything, all the podcasts that I've been able to do. There's a documentary called Peaks and Valleys that were done that gives you sort of an overview of Ryan's case in general, if you wanted to know. And then certainly you can find out on how to buy the book, which Missing for Me is available on Amazon or through Indigo and Chapters and stuff like that. His Facebook page is a one-stop shop.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Heather. For those listening, please be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or check us out on YouTube. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.